Hey, good evening, everyone. I am so excited to chat with Claire tonight. So, through our discussion, we found out that there are so many connections between human design and the auditory system. So, how we hear, especially if you have any issues with your hearing, like tinnitus, like hearing music, anything like that, there is a connection. So, we'll just wait for Claire to join us here. So I was just setting this up to let everyone know I have some thoughts when it comes to human design circuitry. And how we kind of came up with this was that Claire was curious about hearing issues. And my grandmother has been hearing things. So we kind of dove into this topic, and I certainly can talk a little bit about the circuitry, but if you have something to start us off with, Claire.
It really depends where you want to start. I think one of the most interesting places to start is the gate 57.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Gate 57 because
Mm.
Gate 57 is a big game player here because it's located in the spleen, right? So, something that I noticed as I was diving into this was I kind of took the spleen for granted, right? It's about instinct. So, of course, when an instinct comes in, um, sorry, I'm so distracted. I hear myself talking.
Oh,
I'm not really sure where it's coming from. So maybe I'll just talk like this and then I'll pop it into listen. So funny as we're talking about hearing. And of course, retrograde. So gate 57 in the spleen. The spleen is about instinct. So it makes sense that our body hears things through the spleen, right? That intuition that comes into our awareness. And if you've experimented with your intuition, it's kind of like, oh, where did I hear that? What Claire is activated, is functioning here. So yes, gate 57, and there's also gate 28 was when I was talking with a client about this, which is also in the spleen. There's an aspect of being really auditorily sensitive from these places. So with gate
mm.
57, it really is acoustically sensitive, and it has this instinctual awareness. So it and Clara, you can certainly talk more to this, but in my research, 57 really connects with the vagus nerve. So when it's activated, when it's rested, that nerve activates our clairaudience. So we pick up vibrations, especially when you have this gate, this fixed energy. You have these vibrations that get brought into the body and then get translated into the brain, especially depending on if you have a gate 57 channel, right? Depending where that energy flows to. So it was very cool to see 57. And just when we look at it with the gene keys, the shadow energy of 57 is unease. So to have that instinct come in and get uneasy, especially when we're hearing things or, our intuition taps in, there can be a lot going on with that. So gate 57 is in two different circuits too. That's why it's really cool, because it's in the integration circuit, which is all about biodiversity and what makes us different from animals. But then it's also on the individual circuit, which also is highly auditory, and the knowing circuit. So that's internal knowing. So it's just so cool to see how that translates to hearing.
Well, let's go physiologically. How it connects. So I I would say that the 57 isn't so much the vagus nerve. I would look at the 34 as more the vagus nerve. Um,
Mm.
But the 57 relates, according to my perspective, to the cranial ganglia and the
Mm.
left side of the amygdala. So they're both in the brain. What does that mean? So the cranial ganglia, for those who don't know, is basically a bundle of nerves in the head area. And they're not directly involved with hearing, but they are involved in processing sensory information. So hearing and taste and vision. So very appropriate. And then if we combine that with the information in the amygdala, also in the 57, related to the 57, it processes auditory information. So it doesn't just go, ooh, there's a sound. It goes, ooh, there's a sound. Let's connect it to a memory and to an emotion. So this is where if we spoke about people hearing phantom sounds, phantom music, maybe even tinnitus and things like that, the 57 is definitely something that I would want to look at. And I would be wondering, if you're hearing those phantom sounds, what's the memory or what's the emotion that's triggering that sound to really be heard, especially if it's not there to everyone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, to talk about my grandmother and her experience with that 3457 channel. So she not only has gate 57 in the spleen, but it connects to gate 34 in the sacral. That is her generator channel. That is what makes her a generator. And what's really cool about her chart is she has no other gates in the spleen except for 44, which is actually connected to smell. So that's a whole other sense. But with the rest of her spleen open, right, those other gates, having other gates open is you're so receptive to that energy. So yes, with the 57, she is hearing classical music. She was a musician growing up and loves classical music, love Frank Sinatra, because that's what her husband listened to back then. So what she describes that she's hearing is an orchestra playing in the background. She has had tinnitus years ago. It started out as ringing. So it was like, is this tinnitus? Doctor said, no, this is not tinnitus. But as it evolved and kind of continued, it then turned into this orchestra playing. And yeah, it's very cool to hear. So I wish I
Wow.
could tune in to the concert,
Yeah, what's
and
the
be
frequency?
right. Like, oh, what is it? Beethoven? Is it Mozart? um, the other piece with tinnitus and hearing music is that it can be explained as hearing energy. So it makes perfect sense with how you describe gate 57, that those ganglia are actually receiving the energy that's coming in through the ear canal, penetrating the brain, vibrating at such a unique frequency to then be played out as music.
Firstly, to be in your grandmother's head must be maybe amazing and confusing to be hearing an orchestra.
Yes.
My mother-in-law also hears music that other people don't hear. And the thing is, I can't generate her human design chart accurately because we don't know her proper birth time. We can even question her birth date. But the only thing that is consistent in all versions of her chart, which there are so many, is that she has the 57. It's pretty much the only thing I know. So I
Yeah.
think that 57 is involved. And my husband, he has quite severe tinnitus. He absolutely has strong placements of the 57 as well. So yeah, anyone who I speak to with tinnitus, you'll want to go, okay, do you have the 57 amongst other things, of course.
So interesting.
Yeah. Can I say
Because
something about, oh, you go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say my real only experience with tinnitus is when I was an essential oil wellness coach, essentially. And I had many people coming to me with tinnitus, and I created a roller ball. Oh gosh, and I wish I had the recipe right here to say it.
Yes.
Um, but I know it had some peppermint and rosemary. I think it's on my phone. If anyone's curious, message me, DM you, and I'm happy to share the essential oil recipe to put into a little roller. And they would just roll it behind. And now with this conversation, it's like, what did those essential oils do? Did they help the brain? Did they relax muscles so that the energy could come in smoother? It's very interesting to see. Yeah.
Did they influence the cranial ganglia? Did they influence the amygdala? Ooh, I love this stuff.
Right. And I have some books on brain chemistry and essential oils, so I will have to refer to those. So, part
Yes,
two.
please. I want to pinpoint something that you said about your grandmother. She has the 5734. And the 34 in her chart, I don't know if you've noticed, it's in her unconscious Mars. So Mars shows us how we relate to our physical body. So how we relate to our physical body, she's relating to it through that channel, and that vibration is part of how she's relating to the world.
Yeah, that makes me think about musicians
Mhm,
as well,
mhm.
because this may be a very popular channel for musicians to really, coming from the world of art therapy and knowing so many music therapists, to be able to have that experience and utilize that. Oh, I wish I could go back to grad school and ask everyone their human design. See if it's common through music therapists to utilize that energy and transform energy within the body that way.
Interesting. There are so many auditory channels. I always think of the gate 50 when I think of musicians because I've heard it being called the maestro, and it's very much to do with music. I think it's very pertinent, the 50, to music. But if it's related to phantom sounds, I don't know so much about that.
It makes sense with gate 50 being in the spleen, the
Mm.
spleen really kind of being the center for auditory to see where it goes. The only gate channel that I looked at that was not based in the spleen was the 2343 channel, which is still on the individual circuit, but that's more so about being able to communicate what you're hearing, right? That's from the ajna to the throat, the genius to freak channel. So people with this channel can say things that make perfect sense, and you're like, oh my gosh, they're a genius. Or, especially if you're talking about phantom sounds, may come out and be like, what is that person talking about? So my grandmother has none of that. She has neither gate. So how that energy might still flow through, when she talks about it or tries to find words about it. But yeah, that was really the only gate channel that I found connected to auditory. But it was more so just being able to translate that into words, right?
Well, I would love to expand on that. If so, talking about your grandmother's chart still, I found the 24 to be significant. So that is your grandmother's conscious sun. It's the gate of realization. It's very much to do with creative thinking and creative living, but there's a pressure to resolve a thought process as well. But the reason I'm so interested, and as I said, this is your grandmother's conscious sun, and she was hearing an orchestra in her brain. So I dived into this and thought, whoa, what can we learn? So this is obviously about 70% of her conscious personality. The 24 relates significantly to the brain. Three parts. It relates to the ventral striatum and the basal ganglia. So neither of those are specifically involved in processing sensory information, but they do affect how we perceive and how we respond to what we hear. And studies are showing that dysfunction in these two parts of the brain could lead to some kind of neurological disorder, call it that or not, whatever, maybe connection that's supercharged, that could change how we process sound internally and externally. But The most important part for me of the 24 is the neocortex in the brain, which
Mm.
relates to the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe is specifically where the auditory cortex in the body, in the brain lives. It's primarily responsible for processing all the auditory information that we hear. And it's in the temporal lobe, which is in the neocortex, which is in the gate 24. And she has it in her conscious son.
Yeah, and she has that whole conscious channel too. So with 61 being about mystery, right? Wanting to try to solve the mystery. Although I'm just reading the quick reference here of this channel of awareness, right? Still on the individual knowing circuit. So long as you're not trying to use it to resolve your own life, your mind is always capable of inspiring someone else to see life in a totally new light. So, what I hear that as is you hear these things, but it's not necessarily meant for you to solve your own mystery. It's more to hear what other people are saying to help solve their mystery. So, let's also say she's my grandmother. She was born in 59. So 89, she's going to be next month. Nope, I take that back. She was born in 35. My mom
It
was born
sounds
in
more like
59.
a grandmother
Right.
gave birth.
Sorry. Born in
Sorry about that, Grandma.
35. You're still young, Grim. um, so going to be 89 years old, being born in that generation, it's a little taboo to try to solve other people's problems. So to be hearing these things, the conditioning that comes with all of that, with that generation. And music, I'm just thinking about that generation too. Music was kind of new. It was exciting. It was an escape. It was a new form of expression. So, with these channels, with these gates that we're talking about, it makes perfect sense to utilize these gifts, right? And especially with the important placement that you brought up, Claire, um, it makes perfect sense that she, went into band, that she loves music, that it's still playing in her head.
Yeah, it does. And looking at her chart, I found more as
Ooh,
well. I've got notes here. What else did I find? So we spoke about her, was it conscious or unconscious Mars before? Her 34 in the
unconscious.
unconscious Mars. So her conscious Mars was also appropriate. So it was in the gate 61. And so as we know, the Mars shows us how we relate to our physical body. So I'm thinking quite abstractly here. So the 61 suggests to me that your grandma could have felt the cosmic mysteries of the universe in her body. The 61 is related to the pineal gland, a very connection to spirit part of the body. It also regulates circadian rhythms. So if maybe there was some altered, or I'm going to say maybe heightened function in the pineal gland, then that could have shifted the melatonin levels in her body, may have impacted her sleep, which may have potentially exacerbated phantom sounds. There are actually studies connecting these things that seem really random. but yeah, it
Yeah.
could be a thing.
That makes me really curious as to what could throw off the pineal gland because
Oh.
she's 89 years old. She has not had this prior. So, what might trigger
Mm.
this? Because I believe phantom sounds is more common in people of older age, but there's got to be a trigger, right?
Yes, and what if we're talking about phantom sounds, all my research shows the trigger is emotions,
Mm,
particularly stressful emotions
mm,
and the memory of those emotions. So maybe hearing a sound triggers a an emotion that is working for you in a positive way, maybe that triggers some beautiful music, an orchestra in your mind. But maybe hearing a particular sound triggers stressful memory that spikes tinnitus.
And what that makes me think of is the evolution of human design from the chakra system, where the solar plexus split in two, right? We have the
Mhm.
spleen, which is that instinctual body consciousness. And then we have the human design solar plexus of the spirit consciousness, which is really the emotions. So with that, we really almost need to look at the solar plexus to see emotionally what's going on there in my mind to pull apart the conditioning, right? What trauma happened? What was emotionally projected onto you that we might need to heal or work through? Or, especially in the work that I do, what gates in the solar plexus are conscious and unconscious that you need to heal? Or are any of these gates in your south node? Or what are the unconscious placements? All of that to really see kind of what's emotionally going on to then see, connect it to the trigger.
Absolutely. And just to throw a spanner in the works, I agree with what you're saying, but let's take it a step further. Again, looking at your grandmother's chart, she has the 47. The 47 is up here in the ajna. Your ears
Mhm.
are around here. It's what you're hearing. The 47 is the gate of oppression. In the body, it's related to reticular formation, which I
Mm.
find the 47 is very important. If you have tinnitus or hyperacusis, or if you're hearing phantom sounds, the 47 is related to a lot of karma, past life stuff, clearing bloodlines. So could conditioning have come through there? Could there be stressful events triggered from whenever that was? You know what I mean?
Yes, so interesting. And just a quick thought on that note, something that an astrologer said to me, because my grandmother is a Taurus, right? Gate 24, conscious sun, that is a gate in Taurus. My mother is also a Taurus, and I am a Taurus rising. So when I shared that with an astrologer, she said, "Oh, wow, good for you having healed your generational trauma." And I was like, oh, no. She said, your parents have healed the generational trauma so that you don't have that. It's your rising sign. I was like, whoa, like kudos to mom and Graham doing this. So, with what
Interesting.
you're saying, I wonder if there is that generational trauma aspect, and we almost see it play out in that way.
With the 47, you mean?
Yes. Yeah.
I, based on my experience, I think there is. I have 3 placements of the 47. It's a heavy one, and I know that I'm clearing a bucket load of stuff this lifetime, and I also have known for, like, decades, it's not all mine. I'm like, "Why am I clearing stuff? It's not mine." I also see strong 47 in my husband. He's without a doubt got strong generational stuff, and he has a tinnitus as well. I do
And
think that there's yeah, you go ahead.
I it must be. I just pulled up my mom's chart, who does not have gate 47, and I don't have gate 47. So my grandmother must have had this blessing to have healed some generational trauma. And part of it's like, okay, well, if she's healing that through tinnitus and phantom sounds, like, thank you.
Wow, what a really interesting perspective. How was her hearing actually, your grandmother?
I think good. It was always my grandfather we made fun of for he needs hearing aids. I mean, she does have hearing aids now. So, it's decreased in the past, I don't know, 10 years, but yeah, kind of
Mhm.
to be expected when you hit 80. But it would make sense that she has good hearing with that gate 47. She has one, two, three, four active gates in her ajna. So if that, just the ajna holding a lot of that physical ability to hear, and she does have that is on. So one individual circuit, one integration circuit. So I'm just thinking auditorily, but really, I think it's that 5734 channel, which really is a channel of hearing. It's the channel of power, but to have that ability to hear quite physically, but also more intuitively, being able to hear what you need to know to survive in the moment. It's really the ability to that need to hear things to survive. But it also oh yes, go ahead.
I want to expand on the fact that 57 at the moment, you're talking about it so beautifully, and it is so active in the collective at the moment. What I've observed, I don't have any like studies or anything, but what I've observed in people around me is with the 57, a lot of them, when there's huge solar flares coming in, they have a spike in what they hear. It changes. And obviously, there's more energy coming into the planet when there's huge solar flares going on. I'll use my husband as an example. Almost every time when he will come and tell me that it's really bad, something will tell me that there was a massive solar flare recently. Like everyone, like there's been so many recently where people are like, oh, it's off the charts. So the amount of
Right.
times I've said to him, oh, it's off the charts, and he's like, again. I'm like, yes, we could have charted it every single time. And I've noticed in other people as well. So if you do have that sensitivity to vibration and sound, I think when there's a solar flare coming in, I wonder if it's triggering the 57. I'm thinking maybe.
I bet, and especially what that makes me think is for anyone who has a hanging gate 34, right?
Mm.
Not the 57 channel, but if there is so much collective igniting of 57 to make that electromagnetic channel along with the solar flares, would, I mean, goodness, because this channel of power, this channel of hearing is really triggers your inner intuition, that clear audience, to have this inner knowing about vibrations that just cut through of like, what do we need to know right now? What do we need to survive? Um, because it also has the ability to, how do I say it? Read through people's words and tone, right? It's more so what is the energy that's coming through with what they're saying that lets me know if I'm safe or I need to go. So if someone else is being triggered by the solar flares, in their own way, someone else might really be able to intuit this person is not okay. Either I'm not safe, they're not safe. What do we need to do to survive?
And that's a very vagus nerve type thing, to notice that stress. Yeah, and it clatches on because a lot of people, their vagus nerve has lost its tone. It's not calming, it's down kind of like it used to for a lot of people. Yeah, good point.
And just the power of electromagnetic. So for anyone who does have that gate 34, to really have this electromagnetic connection, it really in whatever integration channel it connects or creates, is just like times 1,000.
Yes. I agree. I don't I don't ever look deeply into the circuits. I know of them, but I don't look at them deeply. So it's really nice to hear you talking about how they all fit together and play. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really interesting. And when we started having this conversation, that was really what I kept getting. Look at the circuits. It's in the circuitry, just to make it really basic, right? Because I mean, while there's only three circuits, there are kind of four just with the integration channels. Um, but just to see the themes of the individual circuitry being very auditory, especially the knowing circuit of the individual, is very powerful. And even the centering circuit has a little bit of auditory, but it's more so aura busting, like you can kind of just see
Mm.
through. So I think it's more of that intuitive. And the other piece with the individual circuit is that when you have more individual circuitry, so if many of your channels are on the individual circuit, you tend to be or experience melancholy. That is just
Mm.
a more common emotion that you have with that individual circuit, that you may feel more melancholic. You may be more prone to depression just because of that melancholic tendency. So it's just very interesting when we pair that with hearing. I know with where my grandmother is at right now, having this hearing, not having a solution, she can kind of be a bit melancholic about it, right? This isn't going to get better. I'm stuck with this. It can tap into that suffering. So that's why I love really being able to look at human design energy, but also all of the bodily pieces that you tie into this, Claire, as gifts, right? They're gifts that we get to have and get to play out into our lives.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you're talking about your grandmother getting a little bit melancholy in that way, because I think back to the 47. The 47 is about feeling oppressed. So the more
Mm,
oppressed that she feels, the more that can fuel, obviously, the melancholy as well. She has the 47 in Neptune, so it's
yeah,
very spiritual based. It's also a lot of
yeah.
illusion there. So that's
Well,
interesting.
and
It comes to a spiritual thing that we're talking about in the brain. Hmm.
yeah, and with the shadow of 57 being unease, if you're in a lower vibration, especially if you're receiving a lower vibration through your hearing, yeah, that's really tough. Talk about suffering.
Internally, because no one, it's one of those invisible conditions, which makes it harder always.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
I wanted to jump back just for a moment because we can't talk about hearing without talking about the 43 a little bit more. I don't know if we did before, because she doesn't have the 43, your grandmother. And you said that she's actually hearing pretty well. So that's interesting. The 43 is the gate of insight in the ajna, but in the body, it's specifically related to, oh, sorry, my microphone, it's specifically related to the inner ear and deafness. Whether it be,
Just
sorry,
think,
yeah, you go ahead.
eh, just thinking, yes, I did mention 43 before, but just in terms of the 2343 channel,
That's
right?
it.
That
Feels
genius to
familiar.
freak. But that makes me think, with inner ear is balance.
Yes.
And again, speaking to my grandmother, she has had challenges with her balance. So it makes me think, what is the 43 conditioning of there?
Ooh, deep. Yeah, that's so interesting. And that from from a kind of reading perspective of a human design chart, that's kind of one of the hardest bits to get to, when you feel like there's conditioning in there, but there's actually no gate there. There's something going on, but you don't, it's like, oh, it's a bit harder to go, where do I go next?
And that's absolutely why I am not a traditional human design reader or analyst and
Me too.
don't plan to be, because I'm a therapist first and foremost. I will always be a therapist. And that's where my curiosity goes. What is that conditioning? Let's explore that. Let's uncover it. Let's shift it. Let's heal. Let's put you into that, city essence of your being, whether you have that defined that energy consistently or not.
Absolutely. Another, yeah, I love that. I love that. Another thing with the 43 is it's often connected. So let's talk about someone who has it defined. I know who has the gate. I know a lot of people with the gate. And they, I would say they have selective hearing. It's specifically related to selective hearing. And it is also in the gene keys related to deafness. Now, I know a bunch of people with a 43 who have hearing aids, and they're only like in their 30s. And I would say there's also some selective deafness there. Not, and I don't think it's something that's conscious. I think that they've heard things like, I don't want to hear this. So on an unconscious level, it goes block, 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 block. This is my perspective. And then it becomes such a thing that it's like, I just can't hear properly anymore.
That's so interesting because I really have only, well, more so primarily worked with people with that whole channel, specifically
Mm.
more mental projectors. So
Mm.
it's really a powerhouse. And that is a channel that, like, we need to make sure is functioning well, is on a higher vibration for those breakthroughs to really honor your genius to freak, especially when so much of the body or other centers are undefined.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the ones that I've seen have been more hanging gates, not the full channel. Yeah, makes sense.
Which would, right, make sense that they're yearning for that 23. And now that I say that, I'm like, I don't know that I see many hanging 23.
Interesting. I have seen a few, and interestingly, they can express the selective hearing as well. It's like they're reaching for the 43 but can't get it. This one person in particular that I'm thinking for, I found that in their gate, it was in their chart, it wasn't necessarily the gate in a lot of placements that was where you would find the dysfunction. It's the fact that it was hanging, and it was the opposite one that wasn't connecting properly that I needed to look at and analyze to understand what was going on. And this was a theme in all of their charts. So it's kind of like opposite of what you would usually look at. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, and that is so common in the work that I do and what I see, because yes, you're honoring that gift, your hanging gate, but especially when we look at shadow design, it's all so your shadow chart is all of what you are not, because that is what you're searching for and what you're yearning for, and really what you can easily be conditioned of. So you're absolutely right, especially, in the coaching and the healing that I do, we have to look at that other side. You know, is it off kilter? What are you hanging on to? What do you need to let go of? What is the conditioning there? Because you're wanting to make that channel, right? Opposites attract. We want to have that other end, but we don't. So what does that mean, and how is that translating in life? So I'm so curious, with everything that we've talked about, if there are any other, the little scientist in me is so curious about, just how the body and the physiology and, body parts that don't really get talked about a lot, right? The amygdala, the ganglia, the pineal gland, anything else in the body that really stands out when it comes to hearing phantom sounds, anything like that?
If you want to go deep, I would look at what we touched on before, is the nervous system. Because if the nervous system is in a state of stress, especially if you're adrenally fatigued, maybe look at the sacral center, maybe even look at the heart. If you've got a defined heart and your will is strong and you're pushing yourself, that can throw the nervous system off kilter, and then therefore that can affect those parts in the brain and other parts that we've already spoken about. And then it's this vicious cycle. It's never just one thing. It's always like digging down. How deep can we go? So I would always want to look at the nervous system. What's it doing?
And it's so funny that you explain it like that, because when you say look at the nervous system, I go to the emotional solar plexus,
Mhm.
because that's really where I see the nervous system, and of course the spleen, because that's kind of the other side of the nervous system, that instinctual. And then when we bring in adrenals, I think the root. So it's just funny, you think of the nervous system and you didn't name the three go-to centers that I think of. So I feel like that is just a beautiful example of how it really is the whole body. And we really need to look at everything that's going on because, yes, we can talk about the nervous system essentially in all of 9 centers.
Yeah, expressing itself so differently. And maybe it's my generator self that look, and because I've been through deep burnout, deep chronic
Mhm.
fatigue, I know what it's like for the nervous system to be fried from that perspective, from the adrenals. And I also know people who have been through deep fatigue with bad ear problems like tinnitus to have that defined will center, and they push, 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 push from a place of wanting to get stuff done, but also from a place of not knowing that stopping is the best thing that they can do. So, but yeah, you're right. They're all appropriate. And that's why you've got to understand really how to understand that, to read a chart so you can know where to look, how to piece it all together for each individual person. It's such a beautiful example that everyone is designed differently, and you can't just go, look here for this, look here for this.
Yeah, and with that being said, I think it's underrated, and I've never really heard it be said, to get your chart read by so many different people because
Mhm.
everybody's gonna see something else, right? If somebody does a reading with me, I'm gonna see the conditioning and where you need to heal and, shift that energy, but you're gonna see the body and more from a physiological healing standpoint. So, like, people would need to get a rating from both of us and probably at least 5 other, different field experts out there too to really get a good idea of their whole body.
Yeah, I guess it comes down to, you make a good point. Every different reader will have a different, I'm going to say different perspective, but we all have a background. We came into this with a background from somewhere. Like, I've been in the health industry for 20 years. I am a naturopath, nutritionist, medical herbalist. So, of course, I want to know, how does this affect your body? And I got into human design because I could see clearly how my human design was impacting my body, what I wasn't doing, and why I had all this health stuff I couldn't clear. So that's why I'm like, I'll help you understand that. But your background is a therapist, so you will use all of that and push it into it. Some, not push it, but use it. And obviously, some people are like, what's your life purpose? Let's do your business. And I'm like, that's cool, but that's just not my speciality.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah. And especially when it comes to the hearing and the phantom hearing, to take more of a medical approach, biological approach. If someone came to me for that, I mean, now I have a lot more information, but I would certainly send them your way.
but yeah, it's a good reminder to, that not all readers, just like not all doctors, not all therapists are alike. Like, everyone specializes in something. So if you are going to have a reading, if you want to know more about your chart, then yeah, maybe think about who is the best person for you, not just because this person recommended it or just because this person is this price. It's like, are they resonating with what you really want to get from it? And if you just want a basic reading, well, then maybe you can't go wrong.
Right. There's always a starting point, right? To get a
Of
reading, just a general reading, just a good place to start to dip your toe in.
of course, but we're not here to plug ourselves. Uh,
But if you are curious on Instagram, feel free to DM us, ask us questions. We love them. Stay tuned. Claire shares wonderful information on her page. So
so does Jan.
we are here to help.
We are, we are. I think that covers pretty much everything that I was hoping to cover in regards to hearing in ears. And I'll probably get off and go, damn, there was more. But that's obviously what I was meant to share right now.
Yes, yes, that was so helpful, so interesting to have this conversation and have a chart and a case study to refer to as well.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Claire, so much for being here. Thank you, everyone, for watching the replay, and hopefully we will do this again.
I hope so.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, good.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.